My parents sold my car to pay brother's debt. You don't deserve it anyway. I just nodded. You're overreacting. It's just a car. That's what my mother said, while casually stirring sugar into her coffee, as if she hadn't just shattered years of my hard work with a single decision. I was standing in the kitchen, barefoot, still in my work uniform, staring at the empty spot in the driveway where my car had been the night before. My car. The one I had spent 3 years saving for, working double shifts, skipping vacations, saying no to every little indulgence, gone, sold, to pay off my brother's gambling debt. And they didn't even tell me until it was already done. That morning, my father looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You don't deserve a car like that anyway. You barely go anywhere. Your brother needed help." As if I was selfish for not wanting to fund my brother's recklessness. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even ask for it back. I just nodded. Because what they didn't know was, I already knew exactly how this was going to end. This is my story. And it starts with betrayal. Not from a partner, not from a friend, but from the two people who should have protected me the most. If you were in my shoes, would you forgive them? Or would you make them regret it? Comment below before we dive in. And don't forget to subscribe, because stories like mine, they deserve to be heard. My name is Rachel Morgan, and ever since I was a child, I knew I'd have to fight for everything I wanted. I was the oldest of 3, the responsible one, the one who never caused trouble, while my brother, Daniel, was the golden child, loud, reckless, and constantly rescued from the consequences of his own choices. Growing up in a modest suburb of Ohio, my parents weren't rich, but we weren't struggling either. Still, every dollar mattered. So when I turned 16 and asked for help buying a car, I was met with firm no's and long lectures about self-reliance. If you want something, my dad would say, you earn it. And I did. While my friends partied through college, I juggled 2 jobs and a full class load. I graduated with honors, got a steady job in finance, and finally, after 3 years of saving every penny, I bought the car of my dreams, a silver 2021 Toyota Camry XSE. Not flashy, not luxurious, but to me it represented freedom, dignity, and everything I had built on my own. I kept it spotless, maintained it obsessively, paid insurance in full, registered it under my name. No loans, no strings attached. That car was more than a vehicle. It was my reward. But in the back of my mind, something always felt fragile. My brother, Daniel, was on a different path. He'd dropped out of college after a year, dabbled in crypto, then poker, then sports betting. Every time things got rough, my parents were there, paying off a bounced check here, helping with rent there. At first, I believed it was just temporary, that he'd eventually grow up, that one day they'd say, enough. But that day never came. The first time I suspected something was wrong was a week before my car disappeared. I came home from work to find Daniel in the driveway, pacing and talking on the phone. When he saw me, he flinched, quickly hung up and left without a word. Later that night, I heard my parents whispering in the kitchen, low voices, urgent tones, the kind of conversation you're not supposed to overhear. I stood at the top of the stairs, straining to make out the words. He said they're serious this time. If he doesn't pay, we don't have that kind of money, Jack. We'll figure it out. She's not even using it that much lately. I froze. She? My stomach dropped. I had no proof, but a part of me already knew. They were talking about my car. I remember sitting in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding. I wanted to confront them, ask directly, but something told me not to. Something told me to wait, to let it happen. So I did. A few days later, I walked out the front door and saw that empty driveway. The air was still. The morning sun was just rising, but everything around me felt hollow. And then, the conversation happened. We sold the car, my father said, arms crossed. Daniel owed money, and we had to act quickly. You'll be fine without it. You work remotely, don't you? He said it like he was doing me a favor, like I should be grateful. And when I didn't answer, my mother chimed in with that one sentence that still echoes in my head. You don't deserve it anyway. They expected a meltdown, but I just nodded. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Not just anger, but clarity. Cold, sharp clarity. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to take everything back. Quietly, strategically, completely. The silence in the house after they sold my car was louder than any argument could have been. No one apologized. No one even mentioned it again. My mother just started acting as if nothing had happened, humming while folding laundry, asking me if I wanted coffee, talking about the weather. My father went straight back to his old routines, checking the mailbox every morning, watching the evening news with the volume too high, pretending not to notice the cold wall growing between us. And Daniel? He didn't say a word to me. Not a thank you. Not a sorry. Not even a glance. But he drove up 2 days later in a used black Jeep. Not new, but new enough, and parked it right in the driveway. My spot. I smiled to myself. He couldn't help showing off, even when the prize wasn't his. That was the first real confirmation. I hadn't seen the paperwork, but the truth was right there. He had used the money from my car to buy himself another one. And I couldn't stop thinking, how many times had this happened before? How many quiet sacrifices had been made for him at my expense? I needed to know for sure. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with my old laptop. Years ago, when my parents struggled to manage their accounts online, I was the one who helped them. I set up the logins. I reset the passwords. I taught them how to navigate online banking. They had no idea I still had access. It wasn't something I ever abused. I'm not a snoop by nature. But now it felt like self-defense. I logged into their joint bank account, heart pounding, fingers cold. And there it was, a transaction history so clear, it felt like a slap across the face. A transfer of $4,000 to Daniel's personal account, exactly 10 days before my car was sold, followed by another transfer, 2 days later, $2,800. They'd paid him in full. My breath caught in my throat. They had the money all along. They didn't need to sell my car. They chose to, because in their eyes, his mistakes were always temporary, forgivable, deserving of help. My success, on the other hand, was never seen as mine to fully claim. It was always up for negotiation. I sat back in my chair, stunned. All those years I thought I was proving myself, proving I could stand on my own, that I could be trusted, that I was responsible. And yet it had never been enough. Not compared to Daniel. That realization hurt more than losing the car. Because it wasn't just about money, it was about worth. They didn't see me as someone who had built something. They saw me as someone who could afford to lose it. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay awake, staring at the ceiling, remembering every time I'd said no to something I wanted. A weekend trip, a dinner out, a new coat, just to save a little more for that car. Remembering the pride I felt the day I drove it home, keys in hand, all mine. And now, it was parked somewhere else, probably scratched and dirty and smelling like cheap cologne. And Daniel would never understand what it meant, because he never had to earn it. But I had. And now that they had taken it from me, they had unknowingly given me something else. Clarity. This wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about seeing things as they truly were. And for the first time in my life, I saw it all. Clearly, quietly, without emotion. My family had drawn a line in the sand, and I was finally ready to step over it. I thought I had already felt the worst of it. But the pain didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly, like a tide that pulls you under before you even realize you're drowning. The morning after I saw those transfers, I went about my day like nothing had happened. I answered emails, took a Zoom call with my boss, smiled when a coworker made a dumb joke. I even complimented my mother's new haircut over dinner, like a good daughter should. But inside, something was unraveling. I felt numb, not angry, not yet, just hollow. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and thought about everything I had given up. I remembered the countless nights I walked home in the rain after closing shifts, too tired to call anyone, too proud to ask for help. I remembered budgeting down to the dollar, grocery shopping with coupons, skipping birthdays and bridal showers because I couldn't afford the gas. Every decision I'd made, every sacrifice, was building toward that car, that symbol. That piece of independence I never had growing up in a house where everything was shared. Space, attention, affection, and consequences. But Daniel never sacrificed anything, and somehow, he always got everything. When he failed his classes, my parents paid for summer school. When he wrecked his first car, the one they had bought him, they paid for the repairs. When he lost his job, they blamed his boss. When he racked up credit card debt, they helped him reset. And now when he owed someone thousands of dollars, they took my car. Not because it was the only way, but because, in their eyes, it was the most convenient. I started to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, just silent, exhausted tears. Not just for the betrayal, but for how unsurprised I was. That was the real heartbreak. Not that they had done it, but that deep down, I always knew they could. Still, even through the grief, one thing kept circling in my mind like a quiet whisper. You don't deserve it anyway. My mother's words, spoken so carelessly, like she was brushing lint off a sweater, cut deeper than anything else. I had spent years trying to prove I was worthy, and in one sentence, she erased it. But as I wiped my face with the sleeve of my sweatshirt, something inside me shifted. Not in a loud or vengeful way, not in rage, in calm. It was like watching a ship sail away, a slow but final departure. Something broke between me and them that night. Not out of hate, out of truth. I couldn't fix them. I couldn't make them see me, but I could choose what came next. And that was the first time I truly understood the difference between reacting and responding. I wasn't going to scream, argue, or beg for what was already gone. I was going to think, plan, wait, because the difference between Daniel and me, he was impulsive, I was patient, and if they thought I would just forget, move on, and keep playing the good daughter, they had no idea who I'd become. I waited, not out of fear, out of purpose. In the weeks that followed, I became exactly what they expected of me: quiet, compliant, composed. I smiled at breakfast, offered to help with groceries, even laughed at one of Daniel's terrible jokes. I watched as they interpreted my silence as forgiveness. But I wasn't healing, I was preparing. Revenge wasn't my goal, not in the way people imagine it. I didn't want to ruin anyone. I didn't want to scream or throw things or make them cry. I just wanted one thing: to make them see me, to finally understand the cost of what they had done, and to feel it. And if they didn't want to give me justice, I would take it myself. The first thing I did was request a copy of the vehicle sale. Since the car was under my name, I had a legal right to the paperwork, especially if I claimed I hadn't authorized the sale. It arrived in the mail 2 weeks later. My name, forged at the bottom in handwriting that was almost convincing. I didn't need a handwriting expert to recognize it. It was my father's. A part of me felt sick. Another part? Empowered. I made a copy and tucked it into a folder marked personal. Then I called my bank and closed the small savings account I'd been building quietly over the last year. Not the one my parents knew about, the other one. Next, I submitted an internal transfer request at work. My company had recently opened a regional branch in Seattle, and they were looking for experienced analysts to help onboard new staff. I applied, quietly, without telling a soul. I wasn't just planning to leave, I was planning to rise. But I didn't stop there. I started documenting every financial move my parents made that involved Daniel. I accessed their shared credit card account, the one they still hadn't changed the password on, and watched charges pile up under Daniel's name: video game purchases, late-night food deliveries, a set of new car tires. I screenshotted everything. Then I began planting small, invisible seeds. I offered to help my parents with budgeting again, something I used to do when they were overwhelmed. I acted generous, thoughtful, and they believed me. I helped them create a debt tracker spreadsheet, one that included everything they had paid on Daniel's behalf in the last 5 years. I told them it would help during tax season. They agreed. They gave me numbers, dates, even added their own notes about how Daniel promised to pay us back. I saved every version, every word, because what I was building wasn't just revenge. It was a record of every sacrifice made in silence, every dollar taken without question, every manipulation masked as family loyalty. And then I waited for the final piece to fall into place. It came one night after dinner, when Daniel came home fuming. He'd just gotten a ticket for parking in a restricted zone. Apparently, he thought the sign didn't apply to him. He stormed into the living room and asked my father to cover it. Again. And my father, without hesitation, pulled out his wallet. That's when I knew. They hadn't learned a thing, and they wouldn't. Not until it cost them something real. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you walk away quietly, or make them feel what you felt? Comment below. I'd really love to know. From the outside, everything looked the same. Family dinners, polite small talk. Me, sitting quietly at the table, asking about my mother's garden or how my father's back was holding up. Occasionally, Daniel would boast about something, a new online course he'd signed up for, or a vague business opportunity he was exploring, and I'd smile, nod, pretend to care. They thought I had moved on, that I'd let it go, that I was still the daughter they could count on, dependable, forgiving, safe. But the truth was, I had already left. Not physically, not yet, but emotionally, mentally, I had detached, and that gave me clarity. They didn't notice the boxes I started keeping in my closet. Small ones, labeled discreetly, filled with documents, copies of records, and everything I might need for a clean break. They didn't ask why I suddenly stopped eating dinner with them on Wednesdays. I told them I had a new online course. The truth? I was prepping interviews. Seattle was happening. The internal transfer had been approved. I'd be gone in 6 weeks. But before I left, there was one more thing I needed to do. I wanted the truth to speak for itself. Not through confrontation, not through revenge fantasies, but through facts. Undeniable, inarguable truth. So I compiled a final report. I called it Family Contributions Overview, a spreadsheet with tabs for every year since Daniel turned 20. Each tab listed in painful detail the amount of money my parents had paid on his behalf, tuition advances, car repairs, legal fees, personal loans. I used their own words, their own estimates, gathered over months of budget conversations. Then I added a final tab labeled Rachel, support received 0.00, and beneath that, car fund, earned independently, 23,465 Ys, recovered 0.0. I printed it and left it in a folder on the kitchen table on a quiet Tuesday morning, tucked under a polite note. I thought this might help with long-term planning. Just wanted to be helpful. Rachel. Then I left for work. That evening, nothing was said. My parents avoided my eyes at dinner. My father ate in silence. My mother washed dishes with a little too much force. But Daniel? He was the only one oblivious, still scrolling on his phone, still complaining about gas prices. I said nothing, because this was the moment I realized they were finally uncomfortable. Not because I had attacked them, not because I'd raised my voice, but because they'd seen it, black and white, laid bare, all the years of imbalance. They couldn't unsee it. And for people like them, silence stings more than shouting. The following weekend, I told them I was moving, not asked, not suggested, told. I accepted a job in Seattle, I said while sipping tea. It's a great opportunity. I move in a month. My mother blinked, stunned. So soon? But what about your room? Your car? I smiled. Oh, that's all taken care of. She started to ask more, but my father held up a hand. I could see it in his face. He understood. Or maybe just suspected enough to know that I was finished being taken for granted. And that was enough for me. Just when I thought there was nothing left for them to take from me, they surprised me one last time. It was 2 weeks before my move. I had signed my lease in Seattle, packed half my things into storage, and was finalizing the details of my relocation package. Everything was falling into place. Quietly, neatly, on my terms. Then I received an email that made my stomach drop. It was from my insurance provider. Subject line, Policy Change Confirmation, 2021 Toyota Camry. I blinked. I thought it had to be a mistake. I hadn't owned the car in weeks, technically months, but I never canceled the policy. I was still watching, still tracking, just in case. And now, there it was. A confirmation that the policy had been transferred back into my name, not requested, not approved by me. Changed. I logged into the portal, heart pounding. The car was still registered under my name. The buyer had never updated the title. They had never filed the paperwork, which meant, legally, the car was still mine. And someone with access to my information, had gone behind my back to switch the policy. I didn't need to guess who. I checked the logs. The change had been made from my father's email address, probably using my old passwords. He must have kept them from the times I helped him with banking, utilities, taxes. Trusted him. Trusted them. I sat there staring at the screen, unable to decide if I was more shocked or exhausted. After everything, after I said nothing, caused no scene, let them keep the car, the money, the lie, they had the nerve to go back into my accounts? To quietly reclaim control over something that no longer belonged to them? That wasn't desperation. That was entitlement. And that's when I knew. There was no version of this where we would ever go back to being a normal family. Because what they'd broken wasn't just trust. It was respect. They didn't think I would notice, or that I would care. They thought I would keep being the good daughter, responsible, quiet, grateful for scraps. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I picked up the phone and made 2 calls. The first was to the DMV. I reported the fraudulent sale and filed for a legal investigation of the forged signature. The woman on the line was kind, calm. "It happens more than you think," she said. "We'll handle it." The second call was to a storage company in Seattle. I upgraded my unit from a small closet to a full apartment-sized space because I wasn't coming back. Not for the holidays, not for birthdays, not even to visit. This wasn't just a move. This was a departure. And while I knew it might take them weeks or even months to realize how final it was, one day they would look around and realize I was gone, not because I hated them, but because they had left me no other choice. The day I left, no one helped me pack. I didn't ask. I loaded my things into a rented van, 1 box at a time. It took hours. My arms ached. My shirt clung to my back, but I felt lighter with every trip down the driveway, like I was unloading more than just possessions. My mother watched from the porch for a few minutes, arms crossed, face unreadable. She opened her mouth once, like she wanted to say something, but then she closed it, went back inside. My father didn't come out at all. Daniel's Jeep wasn't in the driveway. Fitting, really. In the end, he was never around when it mattered. When the last box was secured, I went back inside one final time. Not for a dramatic farewell, just for something I had left deliberately, on the kitchen table, in the same folder where I had once left the financial breakdown. This time, it was a simple letter, handwritten, unapologetic. "I hope one day you realize that love is not measured by how much you give someone who takes. It's measured by how you protect those who never ask for anything but fairness. I didn't want your money. I just wanted to be respected. You chose your favorite. I chose myself. There's nothing left to fix. I'm not angry. I'm just done. Goodbye. Rachel." I didn't sign it with love. I didn't leave a phone number. I didn't owe them those things anymore. On my way out, I stopped by the DMV. I submitted the final copy of the investigation report. The forged signature was enough to void the original sale, and since the car was still under my name, legally, it would be repossessed and returned. Not to me. I didn't want it anymore. I arranged to have it sold again, properly this time. The proceeds? I sent them to a women's scholarship fund under my mother's maiden name. Let them wonder. Let them feel the inconvenience of losing something they thought they'd stolen cleanly. No confrontation, no fireworks, just quiet consequences. Weeks later, I received an email. It was short, from my mother. "We didn't know it meant that much to you. We thought you were stronger than this." I stared at the words. "We thought you were stronger than this." It wasn't an apology. It was still a dismissal, dressed in concern. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, 2 floors up, with a view of Seattle's gray-blue sky, sipping coffee I bought with my own money, earned on my own terms, surrounded by silence that finally felt peaceful. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to be the good daughter, the understanding sister, the fixer. I was just me, whole and free. Sometimes people ask me if I regret it, leaving without looking back, cutting ties without ceremony. They say things like, "But they're still your parents," Or family is family. And I used to believe that too. But now I know the truth. Family is not defined by blood. It's defined by behavior. I didn't walk away because of one car, or one debt, or one lie. I walked away because after a lifetime of giving them the benefit of the doubt, they looked me in the eyes and told me, with their actions and their silence, that I didn't matter as much as he did. I walked away because I finally understood that being the responsible one in a family like mine wasn't a virtue. It was a trap. They took advantage of my silence, my self-control, my loyalty. They saw my independence as permission to take, again and again, and I let them, until I didn't. Leaving wasn't the hard part. Realizing they never really knew me, that was. They knew the version of me that made their lives easier, the one who never complained, who helped with bills, who offered to do the right thing, even when it wasn't asked. They didn't know the version of me who finally said no, who made a plan, who got away. I still get updates sometimes. Mutual friends, distant relatives, Daniel's latest failure, my parents' quiet confusion about why I never call. But I don't feel guilt. I feel relief. Because for the first time, I live a life where every decision I make belongs to me. I got a new car. Nothing fancy, just something simple and reliable. I drive it on weekends along the Pacific coast, windows down, music loud. I stop for coffee when I feel like it. I don't check my bank account in fear. I don't ask for permission to enjoy anything anymore. And every now and then, when I pass another silver Camry on the road, I smile, not out of sadness, out of peace, because what they took from me wasn't just a car. It was trust, confidence, identity, and what I reclaimed was bigger than all of that, myself. So if you're listening to this and thinking, that's me, I've always been the quiet one, the one they depended on, the one they took from because they assumed I wouldn't fight back, then let me say this. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe them your savings, your time, your comfort, or your peace, just because they share your last name. What you owe is to yourself, your future, your voice, your boundaries. We are allowed to walk away from people who refuse to see us, even if they raised us, even if they once loved us, even if the world says we should forgive. Because sometimes forgiveness means letting go, not with hatred, but with freedom. Have you ever had to cut ties with someone to protect your peace? Maybe even family? Share your story in the comments. Your voice matters here. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe. We still have many stories left to tell, and maybe one of them is yours. Thank you for listening. I'm Rachel Morgan, and this was the moment I stopped being invisible and started living.